What's up, friends? Welcome back to Rooted Wisconsin, where we share the stories of the people driving Wisconsin business, community, and culture. Happy to have you back for another episode. We'll start this one off the same way we do every single one by thanking you. Thanks for being there. Thank you for your likes, shares, follows, subscribes. We appreciate everything you do to engage with our content, and thanks for being back with another one. Something I haven't asked, I'd love if you gave our podcast a review. It helps a lot with the Spotify algorithm on YouTube. Click that like button, share with your friends, but leaving that review can really help us out. So appreciate you. If you're on Spotify or wherever you're taking in your podcast, leave that review and help out Rooted Wisconsin. We appreciate you. Shout out to our sponsors. We're in the Discover Green Bay studios. Thanks to them. Of course, Riverside Pizzeria, hands down, best pizza in Wisconsin. Got to stop in Ashwaubenon and snag one or seven, feed the whole family. Riverside gift cards. Hopefully you got some for your family for Christmas. And also Forward Beverage Company available at Riverside. Social seltzers, the soft cocktails, had to look to the side and check it out. Paul and Amy are doing awesome stuff with NA in Wisconsin. Living in Wisconsin and being someone who doesn't drink, it can be kind of funky, stopping at the bar. What do you get at the bar? What do you get with at restaurant when you get dinner? Forward Beverage is trying to solve that conundrum for you. So big shout out to them too, coming on as sponsors for 2025. Happy to be back with another episode and welcome our next guest in, Jake VandenPlas. Thanks for coming in, Jake.
Thank you for having me on. It's definitely an honor.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. I was going to call you Jake VandenPlas, but when I asked you, I had to make sure I hit the U sound, right?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a unique name, and rarely people get it right off the first shot, especially when I was in basic training, my drill sergeant. He called me by the wrong name the entire time.
He probably started doing it on purpose to try to get under your skin, right?
And the one thing you never do is correct a drill sergeant.
Yeah.
You let him call you the wrong name no matter what. You're not going to be like, hey, drill sergeant, it's actually... Nope, don't do that. You're just going to bring a whole lot of pain into your life.
Nice, man. Let's start there. What branch did you serve in, and how long were you in?
I served 13 years in Wisconsin Army National Guard,
okay.
Actually right here out of Green Bay. So I actually deployed in 2005 with Bravo Company 2, the 127, over to Iraq, and we ran convoy security. When the 127 was actually transitioning home, I actually volunteered to stay with the oncoming unit. So you could volunteer and stay for a second tour. So I stayed for a whole second tour with Charlie Company, 121st Field Artillery out of Sussex, Wisconsin. I unfortunately wasn't able to successfully go for that entire second tour. I actually got med flight at home for traumatic brain injury. So that tour was cut a little bit short, but nonetheless, we're still on top of the ground and driving forward.
Yeah. That's a heavy moment in life, man.
Yeah, it was definitely life-changing. I heard a quote a while back. We all died, just some of us came back in boxes, and some of us came back still on the plane. We all changed. We experienced a lifetime in 1 year. And that was beneficial for some, and it was damaging for others. And that's what led me to what we do today with DC Farm for Vets.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably, so we got connected through friend of the podcast, John Kramer.
Yeah.
I'm sure
John's
that's where
awesome.
you got to know John, right?
He's great, yeah.
He's a good dude.
We ended up connecting with him, and he came out and taking some awesome photos. He's just a spectacular individual. He's also partnered up with the Patriot Racing Project. He's Jack from the Patriot Racing Project is putting together a sailboat to take veterans out sailboat racing. Specifically the Chicago to Mac race, which is one of my bucket lists. And I used to have a sailboat too. Before we bought the farm, I had a sailboat, and that was something that was hugely impactful for my hailing and stuff like that. Being out sailing and having that almost freedom of the seas at your fingertips was pretty spectacular. So unfortunately, we had to sell the sailboat when we bought the farm because those seasons kind of mash right together, and farming is definitely consuming. But yeah, I'm very excited to be able to be part of that organization as well.
Yeah. So sailing, man. I've always been intrigued by sailing. Never done it. I've never even been on a sailboat. Something that was a passion of yours for quite some time, or?
No, I random. So I do a lot of shit just on the spur, and it's all self-taught too. So I got into sailing by pure accident. I had a little boat. We were living in Menominee, Michigan, me and my kiddo, and I needed a roller for my boat trailer. And the only place in Marinette and Menominee that had a roller happened to be Nest Egg Marine. And my kiddo said he wanted to go for a sailboat ride. He was only 7 or 8 years old. And there just happened to be a couple of sailboats there for sale, and we started snooping around. And the guy at Nest Egg said, well, if you really want to go for a sailboat ride, Wednesday nights are sailboat racing at the Menominee Harbor. He goes, show up. Every boat there was more than willing to take you on. You're going to sit out of the way, but sailing's kind of a dying sport. So all these old timers, they want to have new people on the boats. He goes, they'll get you on the boat. You can go for a sailboat ride. So we showed up for Wednesday night sailboat races, and sure enough, we get on a boat, and hook, line, and sinker, we fell in love with it.
Nice.
Oh, crap. Okay, here we go. So, and this was in, like, beginning part of September. And we went back to Nest Egg, and they had an old 25-foot O'Day sitting there on a trailer. Had been sitting for forever. I think the guy was asking like $8,000 for the boat. It was flooded. It had been sitting there for 2 years. They couldn't get in contact with the guy, and so on and so forth. So I made an offer. I think I offered like $1,500. Way lowballed this because there's a ton of work that goes. All the cushions were junk. I mean, it needed a lot of work.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get a hold of the guy. Finally, we got a hold of him. The Nest Egg gave me his phone number, and I called him directly because he was behind on storage fees and stuff. So they figured he was just dodging them. By the time I finally got in contact with him, he said, I'm really, really sorry. I just got all your messages. And he goes, I was just in jail for my third OWI. And I'm like, well, I just made an offer on your boat, and I didn't know you just had your OWI, so I don't want you to think I was lowballing you because you're in a pinch for an attorney right now. But, I mean, I offered $1,500 for your boat. We ended up selling on $2,000. I'm like, great, here we go. I spent like that whole next week getting it all lined up, waiting for the title to come in from the owner and stuff like that. And within a week, I had that boat cleaned up just nice, ready to rock and roll and go into the water. And I'll never forget the salesman there. He goes, you bought this boat at a great time. He goes, you got the all rest of fall to get it cleaned up and all the spring to get it cleaned up and ready for the water. So what are you talking about, guy? I said, the biggest man I know is sitting at the marina right now waiting to help me stand this mast up. I said, this boat's going in the water tonight, and I will see you out there next Wednesday for Wednesday night sailboat racing. He goes, I don't know about you. You either got no brains or balls of steel. So that's yet to be determined. We'll figure that out as we go. And we actually almost lost that boat first night out there Wednesday night sailboat racing. We ended up, I forgot the name of the weather that hit us, but it was blowing like 10 knots, nice small waves. We're cruising. I'm running single-handed, which is a form of racing when you don't have a crew. And I'm actually running neck and neck with a guy named Captain Jack. Very experienced guy.
Of course his name is Captain Jack.
Of course his name's Captain Jack, right? Very experienced guy, but I'm like, all right, I'm new at this. I watched a pile of YouTube videos, but eventually you just need to get in the boat and start pulling ropes and see what works and what doesn't work. And that's what I did. I spent a whole week crash coursing, YouTube videos. We got it out there, and I'm running neck and neck with Captain Jack. Like, all right, maybe this sailing isn't as hard as I thought it was. So I crack open a beer, and I peek around my sails. And, of course, the sailboats with crews, with experienced guys, they're like 5 miles out in front of me. Right? They're way out there. But I see their boats start heeling over and peeling all over the place. And I'm like, oh, there's a pile of wind coming. So I'm going back to my education on YouTube here and going, okay, I got a couple of options. I should reef the mainsail down a little bit and tighten it down and maybe put up a smaller head sail so it can handle the wind, or I'm going to put my life jacket on and see if I can hold on to this bad boy. I put my life jacket on and I'm going to see if I can hold on to this bad boy. Turns out that was the incorrect answer. I knocked my whole boat right down. So day one, first time taking the boat out, we got to learn emergency procedures on the fly on how to get a boat picked back up. And when my boat got knocked over, Captain Jack's boat swung over and almost smashed into mine. I was like, holy crime. It got from we're cruising and having a good time to we're in some shit right now. And come to find out that this was like once in a 30-year thing that happened. Like even the experienced guys.
The weather anomaly?
The weather anomaly. It was just a pile of wind that came instantly. And even the experienced guys had never seen that. A couple of the boats finished the course, pulled in. I decided at that time to try to reef the mainsail down and pull the sails in. It took me forever. And by that, there was 10, 15-foot waves, and it was just a nightmare. I'm like, you know what? We're just going to motor this bad boy back in. Got the motor fired up. We're cruising in, and the waves were just huge. And when they hit the wall of the marina, they start washing backwards and make this big wash machine effect, which makes it even harder to actually get into the marina. I finally got it in, throttled the motor back because it had a little gas. She snubbed right out. And I'm like, oh, crap. And now the wind blew me right over, and I'm drifting directly at the sheriff's boat. And I'm like, I can't smash into the sheriff's boat, and no one's going to ever let me live this down, especially the guy at the at the marina that was telling me I got all spring. I can't have this happen. So I got myself in the front of the boat up against the safety line, and it took every ounce of my old broken body to push that 2.5-ton boat off the sheriff's boat so it didn't hit it. And I ended up drifting around, and I was finally able to get, because you can actually work the rudder like a little fishtail. So in an emergency, if you need to, you can work it a little bit. It's absolutely not efficient, but you can get something out of it. So I was able to get to a point where I'm standing on the dock finally. I've got one hand on my boat and one hand on the dock as far as I can go, stretched right out. And there's a video. So one of the other boats had a GoPro on and saw me coming in and struggling. And you can literally see them sprinting down the dock, coming over and sprinting back up the dock. And then there's me holding onto my boat at the very end. But in that video, when they get to the end of the first dock, there's an ambulance sitting there. When Captain Jack's boat knocked over and he came over and almost smashed into mine, he actually broke his arm.
Oh.
I mean, it was a pile of wind. It was going from 10 knots and it came at 40 and stayed. It was definitely sketchy. But we learned a lot that day. We definitely learned a lot. And I think that was one of the most powerful tools that I ever learned in life was your failures and your mistakes are the most powerful learning lessons you're ever going to have. It's okay to fail. It's not okay to give up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, persistence is so important for everything in life, man.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
And we took that same philosophy when we got the farm started up. We didn't know what we were doing. I was watching a pile of YouTube videos. I've got a farm mentor because when you're getting into farming, it's always wise to have a mentor, and it's great to be able to have that resource. And we're finally established now to be that mentor for others. But boy, those first couple of years, we failed way more than we were ever successful with.
Mm-hmm.
But we learned. We learned what worked, what didn't work, and every single year, the environment within farming, especially small-scale produce farming, completely changes. It kind of fluctuates with the market, with the inputs and stuff like that. But you're always learning, and it's never the same. We've been doing this now for 6 years, and not one spring has been exactly the same as another spring. It's always different. Sometimes it's dry, sometimes it's wet, sometimes it's just right. Sometimes you get 30 inches of snow at the end of April, and you're like, oh, crap, now what the hell am I going to do? It takes you 10 days to get back into your greenhouse. I mean, that one was sketchy. That was our first year farming, actually.
Yeah.
And I made the stupid comment that if we could survive this, everything else will be easy. That was definitely an incorrect tack to take on that one too. It's it has just been a different hard every single spring, but it's always been an adventure. It's always been learning, and after 2 years of farming as just a standard LLC, we actually transformed that into a 501c3 in an effort to combat veteran suicide. Mm-hmm. We believe wholeheartedly that your health, especially your mental health, starts with the quality of the food that you consume. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to walk into the supermarket and start reading the ingredients and some of the food that we are consuming to understand that this stuff isn't good for you. Right now, I think it's 70% of the country is overweight, and almost 50% of the country is actually considered obese. I think 42% is like morbidly obese. We used to never see this before processed foods. So if you feel better, if you're eating nutrient-dense food, you're going to feel better, and that absolutely does affect your mental health. If you at least feel good, instead of feeling like crap, you can take on a little bit stronger of a world. Mm-hmm. And it's an ugly world. Life is tough sometimes. So it's, and we don't want to just give individuals food. We want to teach that skill set on how to grow it, how to cook it, because cooking's a lost art right now too. Not a lot of people know how to take a stack of raw produce and make something out of it. There's stuff that goes into that. So we teach how to cook, we teach how to can and how to preserve. Right now we're salting hindquarters, full hindquarters off of the deer that we shot this year. The salting method is what was used before refrigeration. I'm still learning that. So we're not officially teaching it yet. I'm teaching myself, and then we should be able to share that with others once we get it refined. But these are the things that we want to be able to teach on the farm: how to cook, how to preserve, how to can, and continue to produce that nutrient-dense food.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a trip of an experience the other day that kind of shines a light on that. I was at this thing, and it was like a cookie decorating thing with a bunch of people, and I just put the icing on mine, and I didn't even think about it. I made the offhanded comment, like, I don't eat food dyes. Like I never eat food dyes, and like 3 people like looked at me like I had like 3 eyes, and I was like, why? How am I the weird one?
How am I the weird? Exactly. Even if you look at the ingredients in ketchup, okay, half the ingredients that are in ketchup are illegal in the whole rest of the world because it's a poison. It is legitimately a poison. Okay, something as simple as mayo. Okay, you can make mayo, farm fresh stuff. It's really easy. Laundry detergent. Okay, you can make a 5-gallon bucket of laundry detergent for like $20, but yet we keep going and buying a half a gallon for $12.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's when you're able to grow and store your own food, that also gives you a sense of control back over your life. So if you're struggling really, really hard with some mental health issues, that's a big thing, is you feel like you're losing control over your life. So being able to grow food and provide for yourself and to provide for your family does indeed give you a sense of that control back. And you also get that nutrient-dense food into your diet, into your family's diet. You're also able to teach that to your kids. So it's a whole rounded program. That's one thing we actually are kicking off in 2025 is our Victory Garden program. So the Victory Gardens actually have a history going all the way back to World War I, and most prominently in World War II. There were so many men deployed into the war, there wasn't enough people back home growing enough food for everyone else to survive. So the government, when they actually cared about us, actually put together a pamphlet. Sorry, I'll throw some more comments out like that too. But they put together a pamphlet that actually outlined, how big the garden needs to be to feed X amount of people. They outlined the actual succession planting, because there's some crops that are like 50 days to harvest.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can plant them in the spring, like peas, you can get them in the ground, and radishes, you can get them into the ground as soon as it's soft. Even if it's wet, get them in the ground. Those bad boys are going to grow. They love it in the cold, and they will actually taste much, much better if it's grown in those colder temperatures, especially radishes. If you bite a radish and it's real spicy and it's got that punch to it, it's because it was grown in the heat. If you grow it in the cold, it's actually sweet. That's where you want to be growing your radishes. And peas are the same, spinach is the same, a lot of your salads and stuff are the same. But nonetheless, if your radishes are 30 days to harvest, well, then you can plant something else right where you had those radishes. So we outline all the succession planting. We're going to be sitting down with these veterans. We're going to get them hooked up with the tiller. We're going to get them hooked up with the cover crops, the irrigation system, the fertilizer tank, and the whole 9 yards, so that they got a turnkey operation. We're going to teach them how to cultivate. We don't pull weeds. We do something called cultivation, because that's, 1, way easier, 2, way ergonomic, much more ergonomically for your body. And just pulling weeds sucks.
Oh, it's terrible, dude.
So we can teach you how to get ahead of that. You just need to understand where your weeds come from and how your weeds grow. And then cultivation is super simple, especially if you're working with a plot. So a plot that's 25 by 50 is enough space to grow about 3/4 of the food a family of 5 need to survive for an entire year. So it's not a lot. There's some work, but again, it's not a lot. And that's one of the things I hear all the time. I don't have time to garden. I don't have time to garden. I don't have time to garden. Well, no matter what, you're spending the time. Okay, when it comes to the laundry detergent, it's going to take you some time to make that 5-gallon bucket of laundry detergent, but it's also going to take you time working for your employer to come up with the finances to go and buy it too. So it's really is a balance. Where do you spend your time? Okay, and don't get me wrong, transitioning from working and purchasing everything to making everything is a hard transition. So you don't want to do that all at once. You want to take one weekend, make your laundry detergent. Take one weekend, make your soap. And then we're going to get you set up with your garden in the backyard. We're going to teach you how to cultivate, because that's going to save you a bunch of time so that your garden isn't overwhelming and overbearing. And we plant it in a specific schedule so that come August, everything's not dumping on you all at one time and you have to can your beans, can your tomatoes, can this, and can everything all at once. We can actually put a schedule to that, so you know that on this weekend your beans are going to be ready, and that's the weekend you're going to be canning beans. And we're going to show up with your pressure canner and cans, and we're going to teach you how to can those beans. We're going to teach you how to make the tomato sauce. And we're going to plant the tomatoes and the basil in a specific time so that it's all ready to go at the same time. And we're going to come back on this weekend, and we're going to can up your tomatoes for you and make you some nice tomato sauce. So the first year or two of setting these veterans up with their victory gardens is going to be a little intense, especially the first year. It's going to be a close working relationship between me and these veterans. Year two, they're going to kind of be off on their own. Okay, you're going to figure it out. I'm still going to be here to be a mentor for you. If you have any issues, give me a call. We still want you to be successful. But by year three, we want that veteran to actually start helping another veteran get their victory garden set up as well. Mm-hmm. We'll still do the fundraising and help get the tools and stuff like that together, but that's going to help grow that network of veterans working together, because once we all get off of active duty, we kind of lose that sense of community and our brotherhood, and we have to get that rebuilt. We have to put that back together. We're just doing that through growing food.
Yeah, that's so awesome, man. One thing I want to pluck out that you mentioned in there that I was excited to talk about today, when did you stumble across the connection between not only proximity to your food, but, growing your own food and mental health? When did those two things collide for you?
Oh, I bet you that happened we bought the farm in 2018. And before that, probably around 2017, we were living in Kewanee. And I worked at the shipyard up in Sturgeon Bay. And if you've ever worked in a shipyard, that's a rough and tumble organization. But I was taking a class. I was also taking 9 credits at UWGB. And I had to take an environmental science class, and the first assignment was to watch this movie called King Corn. I think it might still be up on Netflix, but you had to watch this movie called King Corn and then go 2 weeks without eating or drinking anything that had corn in it. So then we started looking at product labels and went, holy crap, there's corns in everything. Okay, corn's all over the place. Maybe we should start growing our own food. Then every day I drove past this for sale sign by these 2 greenhouses, and I finally called the realtor and said, well, how much for the 2 greenhouses on the side of County S? And she goes, they're asking $325,000. So holy crap, are they gold-plated greenhouses? I mean, I didn't think greenhouses were that expensive, but okay, I guess. Definitely out of my price range at the moment for greenhouses. We're going to put that property in the back burner. She goes, no, it's a whole 40-acre farmette. Would you be interested in looking at it? My wife and I weren't talking about buying a house. We weren't pre-approved. We hadn't even crossed the discussion. I ain't got nothing going on Friday. We'll come to take a look at her. So I go home and I talk with my wife. I was like, yeah, we're gonna go look at a farm on Friday. She's like, what the hell are you getting us
And you'd
into?
never talked about
No, we weren't talking about buying a house. We were nothing. Like, it wasn't even in our purview. We were just kind of cruising through life at the moment, trying to get stuff squared away and still learning how to be married, because that's a process as well. Mm-hmm. But she goes, what the hell are you getting ourselves into? So me and her went and looked at it that Friday. Her dad came along with too, and we fell in love with it right off the bat. Then we went through the process of getting pre-approved. But it was as soon as we started growing, it was almost instantly that I found how much better that I felt about it.
Okay.
And felt about myself. And it almost instantly impacted my mental health. That whole journey, we could do a whole nother show on just that journey with the mental health. But it did take me about 2 years or so to figure out the best avenue to get this and to be able to teach this to other veterans. Mm-hmm. So that was a bit of a process, because working full-time, farming full-time, and we were working and farming, which is way a lot of work. But it took me a little bit to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Mm-hmm. But as soon as we did discover it, we did launch this off. This is our 3rd official growing season, and it has grown exponentially and fast. And we do a Thursday night harvest party. We get a bunch of volunteers and veterans and stuff together. We harvest for a couple of hours, and we put on a big spread of food for everybody. Because it doesn't matter where you go in the world. Okay, community is always built around food.
Always, yeah.
Always. So that meal every Thursday night. Now that is turned into like our farm family. We call it our family. It's beautiful. And we miss it. And kids are there. They're playing. Playing with the goats and the sheep and chasing the chickens and having just an awesome time. And I'm the one fortunate enough to be able to meet all these veterans and to share the time with all these veterans and to be able to break bread with all these veterans every single week. And I feel very, very honored to be able to do so. But the transition I instantly knew that they would be impactful, but how we were able to reach the folks the best, we're still learning, actually.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you always will. Yeah, that'll continue to grow.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's great how you got to that realization. Like afterwards, that's I can definitely empathize. I do that kind of stuff too. Like on a whim, bam, this is happening.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea. Let's go for
let's
it.
do it.
We'll figure it out as we go.
Absolutely.
It's the story of my life, whether it's farming or sailing, and it drives my mom up the wall. She goes, man, I just don't get you. You're one of the smartest people that I know. You barely made it through school. She goes, it came down like the fourth quarter senior year. Like, you have to get a B in English, which is the highest grade in English you've ever gotten in order to graduate. How are we going to pull this magic off? We better, because I'm scheduled for basic training a week after I graduate. So we need to make cross T's and dot I's. But I struggled with school. That's not how I learned. Mm-hmm. And that's the way we're setting up. So the property itself that we have up there, it's Door County. In Door County, between Memorial Weekend and Labor Day weekend, we get about 2.5 to 3 million people that come through that county for tourism. Mm-hmm. So our goal is to actually transition the entire property into an actual education center, so you can come through and take tours and you can see how tomatoes are grown in a greenhouse, how tomatoes actually get trellised, okay, how we grow our beans, how we actually utilize livestock through the rotational grazing and regenerative agriculture to rebuild topsoil. We can actually use livestock to actually clear out invasive species along riverways. Okay, because that's one of the big things that we had. So this spring, it didn't stop raining. For whatever reason, we just decided to have monsoons in Wisconsin this spring, and it didn't quit raining from May 1st until July 1st. I think we got over like 26 inches of rain. Mm-hmm. We got 8.5 inches of rain in like a 3-hour period. And we had the sheep out in the field, and they had like a space the size of this room for 30 sheep. They were all sent on a little island because everything else was underwater. I mean, it was an absolute nightmare. But I forgot where I was going with this story.
The people coming through and visiting and showing them how to do stuff. So
we want to be able to teach that to the public, and the resources from that is what we're doing, utilizing to actually set veterans up and growing their own food. So that's where the DC Farm for Vets portion comes in. But we want to be able to show people how your food is grown, how your food is processed, where it comes from, and why locally grown produce costs what it costs. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's not necessary. So like our chickens right now, we sell at $35 a chicken. I was like, well, that's expensive. Maybe. Depends on how you look at it. One chicken feeds me, my wife, and my 16-year-old, who consumes more food than I ever thought a human was possibly able to consume. He's got to put it in his feet. That's the only thing I can think of. He just eats. And it's like, how? But nonetheless, one chicken serves us for 2 meals, so 2 dinners, okay? And there's still some left over that I can make some chicken salad sandwiches to bring to work, and we take that carcass afterwards, boil it, and make broth. So if you get 2 suppers out of it, plus a couple of lunches, plus bone broth, is $35 really a bad deal? And this is nutrient-dense food. So when you're eating nutrient-dense food, you don't have to consume as much. Okay, your body is going to feel full when it's received enough nutrients, not necessarily enough food. It's the nutrients is where it comes in. So over the course of the last 100 years, all of our produce has lost about 50% of its nutritional value. So in some countries, this has actually caused something called Class B poverty, where you're able to consume enough food, but that food doesn't have enough nutrients in it to actually sustain life. It's like eating cardboard. Mm-hmm. So that's why when we're growing stuff, what our focus really truly is on is actually growing the soil. If you grow the soil has all the nutrients that it needs to actually make that nutrient-dense produce.
Well, and you're organic farming too, right?
We're not certified organic, but we are all chemical free. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Which you have to start with the soil.
You have to start with the soil. Yeah. And that's where all the magic comes in. And we can't use that word organic because we haven't gone through the legal process of getting that certification. And if we did use that, we would get fined like 10 or 15 grand every time we use the word organic. If we're
Oh,
not
geez.
that. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And even the standards.
By who?
The government.
Okay.
Yeah, they get pretty testy on that one. And unfortunately, through the course of time and through lobbying, those standards of what organic really means have been dumbed down.
Mm-hmm.
So just because it's labeled organic in your supermarket doesn't mean that it wasn't sprayed with chemicals. If they're getting ready to have like an entire crop loss, they're still allowed to use a certain amount of actual chemicals. Okay, so that has been lobbied to the point to where that actual organic certification doesn't mean what it used to mean. Know your farmer. Okay, if we want to actually change this scope and how things are happening in our country as a whole, I believe wholeheartedly it starts with where we spend our dollars and how we purchase and consume our food. Okay, if we're all eating nutrient-dense food bought by local farmers, we're able to revitalize your small-time farmers. One, everyone's going to be healthier, so we're able to starve out the medical institutions that I don't think care a whole lot more anymore about us being healthy, which is also going to starve the insurance companies, and we could go a whole podcast on that one. And then along with, we're also cutting the hands off of the pharmaceuticals, okay? We also teach a lot of natural medicines, okay? Mullein, okay? It's that cornstalk-looking plant that grows all over the sides of the highway. It's literally everywhere. That is going to be one of the best expositories you're ever going to have. If your lungs are all and you're coughing and hacking all that stuff up, get yourself some mullein tea. It's absolutely fantastic. If you have a cough and a sore throat, okay, the best cold medicine you're ever going to get is going to be onions and honey. You chop up that onion, you cover it in honey, you put it on the stove, and you heat it up real slow. You don't want to heat it fast, heat it up real slow. And then once the onions become soft, you take it off the heat and you let it cool naturally. Once it gets back down to room temperature, scoop those onions out, throw them in the garbage, and that honey afterwards, that's the best cough and cold medicine you're going to find. I was at a bad cold, knocked it out of my system in 24 hours. Done. Obviously, I gave it to my wife, who is stubborn, love her to death, stubborn, but refused to take that medicine. Yes, sweetheart, I love you lots. If you're listening,
Just don't give her the link.
But she's still there. She a week and a half, and she still has it. So this stuff does work. Something called prickly lettuce. Prickly lettuce is you chop that up, and you can make a tincture out of that. You take all those pieces, chop them into a mason jar, and you use 80 proof grain alcohol or higher. And obviously consult your doctors before taking any natural medicines. There's the plug for legal-wise. But you soak that in 80 proof grain alcohol for about 4 to 6 weeks. You put it in your cabinet in the shade. Don't leave it in the sunlight. And after 4 to 6 weeks, you just take that out. You strain it all out. But that's going to make a pain medication and a sedative that's the equivalent of opium. I mean, it's some potent stuff. And it grows behind my propane tank. Okay? It's all over the place. What was the other one we use? St. John's wort. Okay, St. John's wort is an awesome antidepressant. Okay, but you only want to take that for a short period of time because you can't start doing it. So about 12 weeks is when what you want to take for that. So general rule of thumb, it grows in my field. You can take a bunch of it, dry it all out, and you make a tea out of that. And you usually want to start taking that right around the winter solstice. That's the shortest day, okay? A lot of people have a vitamin D deficiency, which drives a lot of depression. Those short days, lack of sunshine, you're losing a bunch of vitamin D. So if you're preemptive on this or trying to stay ahead of the curveball, we all know we're going to get those wintertime blues and fall into a little bit of depression. So you start taking that at the winter solstice, and then by the time you get through a 12-week regimen, the days are longer. It's a little bit warmer. You can start getting back outside, and you start feeling better. So there's a lot of those natural medicines and stuff that we like to teach as well. I mean, parsley is absolutely tremendous for your digestive system. And obviously we're still learning a lot on that as well. Okay, turkey tail mushrooms. Turkey tail mushrooms are actually a anti-cancerous. And actually, if you lived in Japan and you got diagnosed with cancer, that's like their first line of defense to fight cancer is they give you a turkey tail mushroom supplements. They grow on the logs in my backyard. I got piles of them. Okay. So, I mean, and again, consult with your doctors before taking any kind of natural medicines and stuff, but we're not teaching anything new, but there is a lot of stuff that we can do that used to be used that is just lost information that we're trying to revive and bring back.
Yeah.
You know, especially when you see the FDA do things like, so like all the over-the-counter drug, cold medicines and stuff like that, the chemical that was in it that actually made those cold medicines work, people were actually using it to make like meth.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually changed the compounds of that specific drug that is in there so people couldn't make meth with it anymore. But in doing so, it no longer worked to actually stop your colds. So essentially all the cold medicines are placebo. So unless it comes directly from the pharmacy, the stuff just doesn't work. Okay. And the FDA knew about that back in like 2015. And they just didn't say nothing. And sold billions of dollars worth of cold and flu medications that were essentially placebos. So when I say that I don't trust any of these organizations anymore, it's for just causes. And but we're going to teach the stuff that people used to use, and this isn't new information. This is just the days of yesteryear that is lost information. So
yeah, it's hard to find too in places. It's hard to find and acquire because it's been squashed. You know, it's been squashed and hidden and put on the shelf.
Yeah.
One thing before we get too far away from it, though, I read an interesting article recently. You mentioned it earlier about how produce and its nutrients density has gone down.
Yep.
I read an interesting article recently. I wonder if it's anything you came across about. It's like a timeline. Like once you pluck that zucchini off of the plant or something, like it's not living anymore.
Correct.
So on a day-by-day basis, it goes down. And like you hear about things like even some organic produce you hear of a thing that's like sprayed on it that is, you know, it's made of organic compounds, but it's still to like preserve it
to help to preserve it for the time.
But that's retaining the aestheticness of the fruit and it's not retaining the nutrients. So is that something you've come across, like that timeline of dwindling nutrients from pick
we know that it exists. So that's why when we harvest, we're making sure that from the time that we harvest to the time that our produce is into the hands of the customer is as short as possible.
Yeah.
So, and by design and specifically for that reason, we get a 2-week shelf life off of our lettuce. Everyone's like, really? You get 2 weeks? You know, it was one of the best sales day I ever had on lettuce. We were sitting at the farmer's market in Green Bay here, and one of our customers came through, and there was a line of people there. And he came back to buy some salad again. He goes, I'd like to buy some salad from you, but I still have some from last week. And he goes, honestly, we believed you when you said it would last 2 weeks, but we're actually going on week 3, and your salad is still just as crisp and fresh as the day that we got it. Everybody that was standing there in that line bought salad. I'm like, yes.
Nice. That's great. What you need, yeah.
But I mean, that's what it really is. So we focus really, really hard from the time we harvest to the time that is actually into the hands of the customer as short as possible, specifically for that reason. 1, you're going to get the longevity out of it. 2, there is that diminishing return on that nutrient value of that produce. So yes, we do keep it short. There is some crops that do hold better than others. So like your carrots, those are going to hold a whole lot better. Your root vegetables those are going to actually hold the nutritional value a little bit better than what your like salads are, or your zucchinis or your cucumbers. So kind of the general rule of thumb is the longer the shelf life that your produce has, the longer it's actually going to hold the nutritional value.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought that was the first time I had run across that, but it makes so much sense, right?
It does.
Like it's everything when it goes from living to dead. No matter what you do with it, it's losing something of its existence. You know,
absolutely.
Man, that's wild. So, well, that might take us back too far. But when you decided to pick when you decided to buy the farm, did you have experience farming?
No.
Before that,
not
you
a
just
single bit.
Just dove in.
A lot of YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of YouTube videos and crashing. And when we grew up, we had a little bit of a hobby farm. We had chickens for a little while, and we butchered them. My dad raised some pigs, and we butchered them. We had cows, like one cow, Spike, still remember him. I think it's still hanging in my dad's garage. But that was really it. And my dad had a garden. And it just fascinated me that, like, both my grandpas, they had big gardens in their backyards.
Yep.
Okay, because at that point in time, back in the 50s and the 60s, there wasn't these Walmarts and super Walmarts and all these stores with all this stuff available. And you couldn't afford to feed your family year-round. You had to grow food. So we went from my grandpa's generation, where you still had to grow food, to my dad's generation, where gardening was a hobby, to my generation, where that's all gone.
Yep.
It's lost. So I think it's very, very important. I believe that everybody should be growing their own food. I mean, everyone's got to, again, 25 by 50 feet is enough space to grow 3/4 of the food of a family of 5. I can promise you there's a lot of front yards here in Green Bay that's enough space that you have in your front yard. You can start growing food. Okay. I mean, we can take, that's the best way you can protect yourself. Okay. We all lived through the coronavirus, where everything shut down, supermarkets were shutting down, wearing masks, all this other jazz. No matter what your thoughts and belief are on the coronavirus, or whether you thought the government handled it well or didn't handle it well, we could do another show on that in its entirety. But if you're trusting on these systems to provide your food, which is what we need to sustain life, I think it's a very good position to be in. You want to be able to be self-sustainable, okay? And it's really not that much work if you know how to do it, know how to do it right, and that's what we're teaching. So you can have that self-reliance. So if we do get hit with another pandemic, that's fine. You got food. Hang out in the yard and watch Tiger King again. That was a great show. I mean, those are the years of the Tiger King, man. What can I say? It was great. We spent 2 weeks, and we smashed through that whole series. It was awesome.
Yep.
Sometimes
everybody did, man.
Everybody did. Everybody did. Sometimes I wish we could have another little pandemic and just shut it down. It's like last time I had a solid vacation. But
man.
Well, those are the days. Those are the days.
I agree so much though with especially with the proximity thing, and that goes across to farming and produce. All like you mentioned, butchering animals there. I'm a big hunter as well. You were talking about hunting earlier, and I think it's a different conversation, but it has some parallels where
it does.
Like we're far removed from that process. And I had a pretty fortunate year hunting. I had a good year, and one day I just got really lucky, and it was actually opening day of gun season. We were done really early in the morning, so I got a chance. We have a 3-year-old. He got to come out and see it, and we're still talking about it now because at 3 years old, he doesn't understand the whole thing, but it evokes a lot of emotion out of him. He came with me when, we had some of the stuff processed into different things, and we cut it up ourselves and whatever. And when we talk about any of that, or he sees any of that, it brings up a lot of emotions in him. He doesn't get the holistically what's happening, but he knows that there's something there. So like on that day that that's a really valuable thing to me, for him to come out and we talked about how thankful we are that the animal lived and how grateful we are that now it can provide sustenance for us and all of that stuff. And that's we're so disconnected from that as a society that it brings me some unease at times. 'Cause
absolutely.
And luckily in Wisconsin, hunting is a big enough culture that I think we're in a better place than some other places.
I would say that, yeah.
But I mean, I've talked to people that, are anti-hunting, and 2 hours ago they had eaten a steak. And I was like, well, that is a really strange conversation to have, or a point to stance to take.
Like, I'm curious as to how you've walked down that path and gotten to this conclusion. Tell me more.
Yeah.
No, there is that massive disconnect, and it's not even just with our food industry. I think there's a lot of disconnect with a lot of the things that we do. So even a lot of the things that we face politically, we see that there's this problem right now, but we don't see the entire history of how we got to here first. So when we start talking about solving issues as a society, if we don't understand all the history and backdrop, we really don't know the best avenue to actually solve it. And the farm and what we're doing with this teaching, this is my personal belief is how we do cross a lot of those bridges and how we do solve a lot of those problems is we're eating better food. We're building those communities. So when you get your victory garden set up, even if it's not a victory, and if you're just gardening in your own front yard or your own backyard or whatever it is, okay, work with your neighbors. Okay, there used to be, before social media and all this other good jazz, people used to go over to other people's houses almost once a week and have meals with other neighborhoods and families. That was a regular occurrence to be working within your own very, very local communities. So maybe you don't have enough space to grow everything. Maybe you just grow potatoes and you share those potatoes with all your other neighbors. So now you have all of this produce, so you can barter and you can trade, you can do that. Maybe you don't have chickens and you got a bunch of extra radishes or beets. Well, you can trade those beets for your neighbor's eggs or whatever it may be. But you're rebuilding that community. And I think that's the path we all need to take as a society.
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot of that missing. That's part of Door County Farm for Vets too, right? Don't you have like tell us what it's called. It's like a distribution type of thing, right?
Yeah, so we're part of a large, so we got a couple of different programs. We got our Thursday night harvest party. We got a bunch of the volunteers and stuff. And those that are coming out to volunteer and help, you're taking food back home with you. So it's not just like free labor. You're there. That's their opportunity to get a week's worth of produce and for coming out and helping. Plus you get a meal out of the deal too. We're also part of a very large co-op. Okay, so that co-op is called Seasonal Harvest. Absolutely awesome. And it's my farm mentor, Darren at Ledgeview Gardens. Him and Sherry. Sherry is awesome as well. I love her to death. They put together this co-op focused real specifically on like school systems. So like schools want to buy local, which is great. Awesome. But my farm, just my little old farm, I can't grow to the size, scope, and frequency that even one school needs, let alone a whole bunch of schools. But if we take a pile of small farms and pool them together, well, now we can service bigger orders. So say like Southern Door School needs 200 pounds of green beans. They can order 200 pounds of green beans. They might get 50 from me, 40 from here, 20 from here, 50 from this farm, but we can service those bigger institutions. So with that co-op, we're able to service like the Ashwaubenon School District, Madison Area School District. I think all the Green Bay school districts are on there. Ashwaubenon, De Pere, Howard Swamico, Pulaski, O'Connell. We saw a lot to the Green Bay Packers. They were one of our biggest customers this year. We're pretty proud.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So the Packers will only buy my kale and only buy my collard greens. Yes. So it's pretty awesome. So when we get these volunteers and stuff together on their Thursday night harvest party, that's specifically to fill orders for seasonal harvest. And we also work a lot with the United Way and do community boxes for disenfranchised communities down in the Milwaukee area. So when the volunteers and stuff are coming out and we are harvesting, we're actually harvesting to feed the future of the nation, which is pretty awesome. We also have an online store set up. That's our version of a CSA, a community-supported agriculture. And we set ours up a little bit different.
That's what I was going for earlier.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of that phrase, but yeah.
Yep. So your traditional CSA model is you pay a lump sum up front at the beginning of the season. And typically there's a full package or half package. And then for X amount of weeks, whatever is determined, sometimes 16, sometimes 20, sometimes 22 weeks, whatever the duration of that specific program is, you'll just get a random box of produce. Whatever's in season, put it together, poof, here's your box. But if you go on vacation, well, you're still getting a box of produce. You already paid for it. So what we did is we studied a whole bunch of other farms and what they have done in their CSA programs, and what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, and we decided the path for our community-supported agriculture is to actually have a membership program and an online store. So it works like Sam's and Costco. It's a $10 a month membership fee, but that gets you access to our online store, and you can jump on our website, order all of our products. So whether it's produce, we got our chicken up there. We got beef. I got to inventory it and get it up there yet. It's just been a little busy last week, but we're going to have lamb and stuff up there. And we're actually going to be sitting down with our members, and they're the ones that are going to actually dictate what we're going to grow. And they're going to dictate the future of stuff that we are going to grow. So we're only going to focus on having a specific amount of members. This isn't going to be taking on 200 members. We got 10 acres segregated off for vegetables, and we are going to service just enough that we can have feed all those 20 families. So we're capping it this year at 20 members. The expectation is that we're spending $100 a week. Okay, that's what helps fund us. Now, that expectation isn't that we're going to hit that right away. Obviously, stuff is seasonal. We're not going to be there right off the bat. But we're working on building that relationship with those customers. So they're not just a customer once in a while. We want to grow the vast majority of all of your food for your entire family. Okay, if you don't have time and you want to go to the corporate setting, great. You still want to have all that locally grown, nutrient-dense food, just as if you have a farm in your own backyard. You're going to get that working with our membership program. So it's going to be kind of intense. It's going to be a very personal relationship with our members. So you're getting exactly what you want. And then our expansion and our growth. We're going to get some apple trees set up there and some grapevines and some more asparagus and stuff planted, but it's going to be tailored to what our members are going to be expecting and stuff. So you kind of get a custom farmer when it comes to our membership program.
Mm-hmm. And if people haven't had a garden or farmed, they might hear 10 acres of vegetables and be like, well, that's not much. How's it going to feel? 10 acres of vegetables is a ton.
That's some space. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And part of that 10 acres is, so there's going to be only a handful of crops that we're going to be growing for like seasonal harvest and through that co-op. We just talked with Sherry yesterday. We're going to be growing okra this year, so we're actually going to have about 100 okra plants in the ground, which might sound like a lot, but we also had over 1,200 pepper plants in the ground this year too. So, I mean, we finally have acquired all of the tools that we need to be able to grow to scale, because if you're growing there's a difference between growing a farm in your backyard and then growing at a scale to pay bills. Mm-hmm. Which every single year gets harder and harder to do. Obviously, with the cost of living continue to go up, that does put a pinch on all local farmers, which is why we have to be very dedicated and detailed with what we're growing, and why we're focusing on having only those 20 customers is because we're no longer in the position to grow a bunch of stuff, run it down to the farmer's market, and hope it sells. All the leftovers, maybe feed to the pigs or whatnot. Farmers can't do that anymore. Everyone that is growing produce at the scale that we're growing is drastically cutting back and being very, very detailed with where we're placing our very limited resources. But I also think that this is the wave of the future, okay? Small scale farms on 10 acres growing for a certain amount of families within that area. Now, we do have a 40-acre farm, but only the 10 acres is to vegetables. 20 acres is going to be getting fenced off for the rotational grazing of sheep. We got a large grant for that. We should be breaking ground on that come springtime. Part of that grant is to till that 20 acres down and then replant the whole 20 acres so it actually has the proper vegetation and grasses to maintain the sheep. And we actually rotate those sheep from paddock to paddock and then follow it up with chickens, which add a whole other microbiome to the soil and so on and so forth. And then that last 10 acres, we're hoping eventually to win the fight with the DNR and get a pond dug. That's a whole nother conversation. But and then get some tiny homes set up out there. And those tiny homes would essentially serve, we're not sure how many we're going to get out there yet, probably 4 or 5 of them. But we'll be able to house and feed and have a couple of veterans actually living on property. And then they'll be the ones that actually manage the property and the day-to-day operations and stuff.
In like an immersive learning experience type
Correct.
thing? Got it.
You're fully immersed into it. You're going to get right into it. And you can either we have the resources currently. We got an old camper there. It's not the most fanciest thing, but it's also not a tent in a desert at 140 degrees. Yeah. So, I mean, it's that's hot. You want to talk about hot? Have the air conditioner go out in your tent in the desert at 140. You go from this is hot to holy crap real fast. Or a porta potty for that matter. But, it's just a nightmare. You're in and out of that bad boy quick. But it's literally melting your contacts in your eyeball. It's so hot. Man. But no, the veterans are going to be in the tiny homes. They're going to be the ones like maintaining the livestock and maintaining the vegetables and doing the cultivation and stuff, so that I can give tours on how things are put together and focus more on the big picture stuff and how to actually grow as an organization. So the actual growing portion of the operation, like actual farm work, we're running 70, 80 hours a week. Okay, that's just the grow portion of it, let alone the whole business portion of it, the accounting and the marketing and getting the actual voice out to it and all the other stuff that goes with it. It's a lot of work. We're definitely busy, and it's a lot, but it's very rewarding as well. And we're reaching the folks that we need to reach, but we do have big plans for the property.
And a lot of that's probably being driven by the fulfillment you're getting out of it, right?
Oh yeah, and that's. There's nothing later today. We've got the House of Honors is coming up. They did a big fundraiser a couple weeks back at Stadium View here, and we were one of the recipients. And last night we were at the Retired Military Officers Club of Northeast Wisconsin, and we got a large donation from them as well. So we're at the point now where we have other organizations that are helping fund this. So it's not just me out having to also go do the fundraising and put on the events, because that's a whole nother animal too, and a whole nother level of work. That adds on to it, to the fundraising portion of it. In a perfect world, this entire operation would be funded off of the donations, so that everything that we grew could be donated to local food pantries. So as it's at this last summer here, there are 7 food pantries in Door County. I believe we were the only ones that were actually putting any produce into those food pantries.
Yeah, which probably isn't that surprising, right? Like it may be a little bit, but when you think of it, a lot of that's driven by some of that shelf life we were talking about earlier, what it takes to produce all of that stuff. But you probably go in there and there's a boatload of canned goods, right?
There's a lot of canned goods and stuff, and they're able to get a lot of like frozen meats and stuff like that have almost expired and so on and so forth. But when it comes to that actual fresh produce, you're either growing it specifically for that, or, I mean, and I've heard this a lot of times before too, because at the end of the farmer's market, Paul's Pantry shows up there, and they just got these big blue barrels. They kind of just dump everything into it. And I'm like, half of this is going to be smashed and junk by the time you get there. You know, and don't get me wrong, and I've heard some of the, not specifically with Paul's Pantry, but I've heard some people say, like, you produce that have blemishes and stuff and on it. So that's the stuff that we're going to donate to the food pantry. Well, it's kind of demoralizing when you walk in there, and then when you are struggling, and then when you do walk in there and I struggle asking for help, because I feel like sometimes I'm a burden on others, and I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there that do struggle. In fact, I know there's a lot of guys out there that struggle asking for help, especially when it comes to mental health. Stubborn like my wife. Ask for help. Okay, we're gonna throw that plug out there right now. Call somebody. We're all here. We all love you. So ask for the help. But nonetheless, when you are struggling, and then you finally step in and say, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the food pantry, get some food," and you walk in there, and it's all smashed and half rotten. That's just demoralizing. So if you are hungry, if you do need food, and we have done this before in the past, and we will continue to do so in the future. And if you need to keep it private, I can promise you, you're safe with me. I can tell you right now, there's about 15 veterans that have come through me just this last summer that will absolutely remain anonymous, but they've gotten food. They've gotten the help, and the door's open. Come back. We love you.
Yeah, that's so true, man. I mean, there's a lot of content around it, and it's poignant to say that, you know, you don't ask for help because you feel like a burden, but it is. That's the driving force of a lot of it. Yeah.
That stems a lot into men's mental health. That's a conversation that doesn't happen a whole lot. And this is the conversation that we do have a lot, like in the greenhouse come springtime. Okay. In the springtime, we've got 3 separate private schools that we work with. So you've like your tomatoes and your peppers and stuff. They have a very, very long growing season. And because we have a short growing season in Wisconsin, you have to get that stuff started in a greenhouse ahead of time. So there's 3 schools that we work with. And last year we moved almost 3,000 plants between all 3 of those schools. But that gives us an opportunity in early spring to get guys and folks into the greenhouse working. It's warm. The sun's out. You're getting that vitamin D. It's going to help pull you out of that depressive state and get you doing something productive. But it's in those scenarios when we have those conversations. And it typically starts with me telling my story. Okay? Because if I'm not willing to put touchy things out there and things that I have struggled with out onto the table, I can't expect others to do so as well. So it starts with me, and I'll lead the way. I'll tell about my hardships. I'll do it publicly. I have before. I will continue to do so, because that opens up that comfortability for others to talk as well. And they do speak a little different language. Sometimes they're communicating back with their struggles and be like, yep, yeah, that's been there. And that might be all that they say, but that might be all that they need to say.
Mm-hmm.
And that opens up that door. But no, we have to be able to talk about men's mental health. And you're not a burden. You can most definitely come and talk.
Yeah. Transparent, authentic leadership, man. That's what you're boiling down to.
Yep.
You talked about funding a little bit back there. I wanted to make sure we got to that today.
Yep.
How do you drive that?
More
that's
often
a big
than
task.
not. Yeah. With the workload that we've got directly into the farm, it's hard for us to drive funds, but you can definitely send us an email and we can guide you on how to make a donation. That's huge. A little bit goes a long ways, especially when it comes to setting up these victory gardens. That's going to be about $6,000 per victory garden once it's all said and done, between all the materials and stuff that we're showing up with.
And you're hoping to have those veterans not incur any of that cost, right? Like they're
correct.
getting
We're
that set up.
we're funding all of that.
Yeah.
But there's also going to be a little bit of a vetting process for the veterans. Unfortunately, not all veterans are created equal, just like everything else. But we want to make sure that the veterans are going to have that level of dedication to actually make this successful. What we don't want to have is to have these tremendous organizations making us these donations, getting a veteran set up, and then by year 2 it falls apart. So there is a vetting process that comes to our veterans that are getting these victory gardens, and that is mainly to protect our precious resources that are coming from our donors.
Mm-hmm.
That is really, really important for us. And so far, every dollar that's been donated to our organization, we're actually able to donate back into the community in plants or produce. So right now, it's a dollar for dollar match. In our first 2 years of operation, we've donated over $47,000 of plants and produce back into the community. So if you'd like to make a donation, we can take that. We can do what we need to do under the farm, and then we can also donate that back into the community and help feed the local community as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
The work you're doing is really valuable.
Thank you.
Really valuable.
It's really rewarding as well. I'm the one who gets to reap all the benefits of that camaraderie that we've built, which helps my mental health. So what a lot of the volunteers and people that are affiliated with our organization don't know is how much they're actually helping me too.
Yeah. That's probably one of the hard parts of growth, right? Because with growth, you get pulled in some different directions.
Yes.
And then sometimes they're the directions that aren't as immediately fulfilling.
Yes, that's one thing. And I was talking to a guy at the military's event yesterday, or the Retired Officers Club yesterday. He got into gardening. And that is one thing that veterans, when you're getting deployed, you live for like the here and now, because you're not sure of your future. And it's really, really hard to come back out of that mental state. Sometimes it takes you a decade after being home to not live for today, but to actually have a plan for the future. So when you're growing food, you're taught patience. You're taught that immediate gratification is not going to happen. When you plant that seed, you're going to have to wait. There is no immediate gratification. And maybe that's why it tastes better too. But you're waiting, building up that anticipation. But it teaches you certain skills that pull you out of that living for the here and now and actually start planning for the future, which is also hugely tremendous for your mental health.
Absolutely. Yeah. And really the success of life, or
Yes.
quote unquote success of life.
Absolutely.
Delayed gratification can do some things for you if you're
Yeah.
willing to put some things on the table for a little while and let them
Exactly.
percolate.
It teaches patience, it teaches technique, it teaches nurturing, and it all comes together. But yeah, we're very, very proud of what we've done. We're very, very proud to see where it goes. Next year, we're opening up not only the Victory Garden program, but we also teach beehives. We teach mushroom cultivation. And when it comes to the beehives, we're actually transitioning from our Longsworth hives, and we're actually going to build a Swedish bee house. Now, a Swedish bee house is, I don't know of anybody in the state of Wisconsin that has one.
I've never even heard of it.
Precisely. Okay. And I just working my way through YouTube, because that's what I do. I stumbled across this week, because the hardest thing about beekeeping in Wisconsin and actually all northern climates, not just Wisconsin, is getting them to overwinter, okay? So the bees, the cold isn't what gets them. It's actually the moisture is what gets those bees. So it has to be vented, but still, one box of bees, 2 brood boxes of bees sitting out in the woods. I mean, it was -1 yesterday morning when I went to work with a -25-degree wind chill. Those bees actually dislocate their wings and vibrate them at a frequency to generate heat, and they will keep the interior temperature, that heat, at 97 degrees. Okay? Fascinating little creatures. Beekeeping as a whole, we could do a whole podcast on just beekeeping. They're absolutely complex, and that's probably why I'm fascinated about them, because no one can get them dialed in and actually perfect it. Everybody is still learning bees. But everyone in Wisconsin, actually probably the entire United States of America, uses something called a Longsworth hive. Okay, your brood boxes are on the bottom, queen excluder, honey supers on top, and you work them from the top down. Your Swedish bee house, this is actually a Slovenian hive that you work from the back to the front. Okay, so now what that does is inside your hive, you have different types of bees. You got your nursery bees, you got your worker bees, you got your queen bee, which runs the whole operation. Everything revolves around your queen. Even in my house.
Stubborn or
so you
not.
hear that? Stubborn or not, revolves around the wife, the queen. But you also have guard bees. So when you're managing your Longsworth hives, you got bees flying all over the place because those bees are protecting that hive. But with the Slovenian hive, you're working it from the back to the front, and all the guard bees are in the front undisturbed. So you can almost manage the entire hive without a bee suit on. They're docile and they're very easy to handle. And now that Slovenian hive actually goes inside a small shed. So it's kind of protected from the elements. It's still put up against the wall because they still have to do something called a January cleanout. So they'll actually go out January, and a decent warm day in January, each bee will fly out, shit, and then fly back into the hive. So you'll go out there one day and there'll be a whole line of bee poop in the snow. And you're like, oh, looks like they did their January cleanout. They're done. They're ready to rock and roll. So they still need to have access to do that and access to the outside. But it's a little narrower hive and it's taller, and you can still fit the same amount of bees in, and you still have the 2 brood boxes and your queen excluder with the honey supers on top, but it's all managed from inside one building. And now if you have 10 or 20 hives all in one little shed running at 97 degrees all winter long, they can piggyback off of that heat, also protected from the elements. It's called a Swedish bee house because this is how they do bees in Sweden and Finland, in those very northern territories. They still have pollinators there. They still do beekeeping there. It's just a completely different style.
It's your own little bee sauna.
It's your own little bee sauna. And conveniently enough, I have my deer stand is on a hay wagon, hardly only used for 9 days out of the year. 3/4 of it is open, and I can fit almost 20 hives inside that bad boy. So now I'll have a heated deer stand.
Nice.
I'm so excited for that. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. And one of the other cool things about the bees is they'll actually, when they're buzzing around, that's actually in the frequency of C, which has been proven to be calming for symptoms of PTSD. So inside our Swedish bee house, we are going to have a recliner in there, and you can go and sit in there if you're struggling for as long as you need to. Go in and sit in there, relax, listen to that buzz, and calm down a little bit. So these are the things that we're looking for. And falconry is something we want to get into as well. That's going to be a very intense program. That's like a 2-year licensing process. But that then also turns back into the nurturing portion of it. You're catching a wild hawk. And in order for that hawk to trust you, you have to build a relationship with this hawk through food and through working with it. So building that intense relationship with this wild animal is going to be therapeutic. It's going to be beautiful. I'm awesome excited for that. And I want to walk around with a big hawk on my arm. I mean, it's going to be cool.
Who wouldn't?
Like, right?
Yeah.
Give me a hawk and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I appreciate you coming in and telling us all about it. It's been fascinating chatting with you. Hopefully I can stop out and check it out sometime.
Definitely check it out. I would definitely recommend summer months to come up and take a peek versus winter months, but we would be honored to have you up.
Thanks for coming in, Jake.
Thanks for having me.